Welcome back, everybody, to the Right Path Podcast, where being an author, an actual author, still matters. This is the podcast that's for authors, it's about authors, it's done by an author. It's where we share our journeys, we explore our creativity, but most importantly, we examine that ever elusive why behind it all, folks. Our guest today, he's a remarkable young man. I have had a wonderful time talking to him just as we've been getting ready for this podcast. So, looking forward to hearing the story behind the story here. He is an author and a musician. He has written his memoir, Rise and Climb, Finding Purpose Through Pain. Please welcome to the show, Ben Barbic. Ben, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited about this conversation that we can have on this. I think it's just there's such an alignment for what you're doing and what I'm really, an advocate for within the world of writing. So I very much look forward to this conversation.
That's awesome. It was funny because we came on and we started just agreeing immediately, like, well, you want to do this? Yeah, let's do this.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
the flow. That's right. Flow happened immediately. So I
I
know we
said,
have good things ahead.
I think we're in good shape. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Moving forward. So, Ben, tell everybody a little bit about who is Ben Barbic, and kind of what led you into this, writing game.
Yeah, well, I think, if you were to look at it as a musician, I've always been fascinated with words and communicating through words. And so, as a lyricist, as a musician, back to when I was 5 years old, it was within the words that I found the escape, dealing with the difficult times in life and things like that, where words really had a significant piece for what I would call almost a safety or an escape. And so, as life went on, those words and songs translated to eventually fast forward quite a bit of years to me sitting in an airport going to do a show. And I decided, you know what, let me start writing my story about how I got here, about my journey through music and through life, and just casually started writing. And, it wasn't foreign to me because I'd written music for a long time. But I think within the words of the memoir, truth started emerging. And so it became something to where after I got down a little bit further and I decided, well, okay, that's a nice rough draft of 10 pages. Let's take this further and let's see if I can get a quality draft through. And after the quality draft through, the cycle began that I'd love to actually get into. But I think it was in that initial writing that I realized that there was a medium that was there for me that I wasn't tapped into, that I could do and I could implement seemingly daily on my journey. And now that was, it took me 8 years total to write my memoir. I mean, it wasn't an
Wow.
instantaneous thing, but I learned the process of writing through it, and I had to be humbled along the journey in order to find the truth within my writing, and that took a while too. And again, I'd love to get into that as well.
Sure. Well, we can, get into any of those things. I think it's fantastic. That's a big question for folks. I think when they get going is, all right, I want to write. I have kind
Yeah,
of an idea. Now what do I do?
right,
Right. Now,
right.
you didn't have training in, writing or being an author or anything like that, or did you?
No, I didn't have any training in it. It just came from kind of lyric writing, and
Ah,
the benefit I think of writing your own memoir is the story is there at its core. So even if you tell it at a
right.
primitive level, the story is already theoretically written in some form. And so you just now need to find the gold within it, the through lines within it, why that story matters to the audience, and why they would take the time to read it. And so, I think for me, and maybe this is for other people, like the original memoir that I began was more of a desire for my kids, grandkids to be able to say, what was dad, grandpa, great grandpa up to in this period of time in human existence, right? And so I really started from that perspective of I'd like to get down my story for those around me. And then I quickly realized that within those pages, there was something bigger than that. And so in finding something bigger than that, I felt almost a sense of duty and obligation to then write deeper into that, right? Because if I'm now saying that this is something that strangers can get value from, then I can't cheat the reader. I need to give them the whole story. And if they're taking time out of their life to read about my life, then I really need to give them the core item of value. And I think as a writer, that was one of the biggest struggles when dealing with the memoir is diving deeper. So obviously I had to get better at writing and all of these type of things and finding my premise and things that were very obvious once I found it, but took a while. But it was diving deep into the story line by line and saying, why am I saying, is this an ego thing? Am I saying this particular name because that name matters? Look at me, I'm with this guy, or I did this thing in music. Or is there something underneath that I'm actually supposed to share, if you will, to get to the core of it? Is it the rejection I felt within that? Is it the dismissal that I felt within that? Is it that it didn't work out? Or if it did work out, why am I sharing that? And so I really started to formulate that from that perspective. If it was a hardship from my childhood, I'm not sharing it for me. I'm sharing it to connect and say, okay, like for me, when I was 5, my house burnt down and then 4 years, and I lived in a trailer with no power and no running water for a while. And then we rebuilt our house and it got destroyed again 4 years later in an earthquake.
Oh,
So why I'm sharing that is that's how I found music. I found music in that age to go inside of it, to escape from the chaos, and it was something I could trust. And so at the core, the story is this happened, but the goal is actually this other thing, which is okay, well, these things might happen to you in some form, but what I gained out of them was I was able to go inward. And now, many decades later, that initial seed has become this other thing. And so that's where I think I ran into some difficulties as an author because I needed to really paint those pictures. And, you know, um, those are hard to revisit. So, 8 years was a lot of revisions. It was a lot of reevaluating those situations for what's in the core and many of them, that was just two examples, but many of them, and saying, am I giving them what this actually was, or am I glazing over it because I don't want to revisit it? And so it's somewhat, I would say it's somewhat torturing to revisit over and over, but the byproduct of that is slowly, whatever you were holding of it dissolves away too, and so that's the magic of it. That's the magic of it on repetition and how an initial memoir morphs and changes into this other thing. And, things that I thought mattered were maybe me frustrated with some people or things that actually didn't matter once I started really diving into what my story is truly about. So surface level versus depth. And that's fascinating to me as an author is that concept in general. And one of the books that I loved, Stephen King's On Writing book, was a blueprint for me of like I felt a lot of times I'd get up at like 4 a.m. and I'd work on my revisions. And his way of like calling out writing was so beautiful in that. I don't really read the type of books he writes, so I haven't been that exposed to his work. But that book was so brilliantly written, and the call to action was like, don't mess around with this thing. Don't cheat the reader. Don't mess around. If you're gonna do it, you give it what it deserves. And don't be cliche in your wording. Don't be, you know, vague in your wording. Dive in and so things like that were very much inspirational, especially coming from a perspective of um, in music. I've had years of feedback. I've had years of releasing music, feeling the audience's response to the music. So I've been able to judge the quality of it from feedback. But as when you write for the first time, you don't really know. You don't know. You don't know anything.
right.
And so that might be long-winded answer to your first question, but that's a general start to it.
There's no such thing as long-winded on this show,
Okay.
man.
All right. I like that. I like
It's
that.
your story, so it's
Yeah.
wherever it goes. But no, you brought up so many different aspects
Yeah.
of what we go through as authors, to
Right.
begin with. But one of the biggest ones I want to make sure I hit on for folks is the memoir piece.
Right.
When you're writing a memoir, this is not a fictional story where you get to make something up.
Right.
You don't get to live vicariously through a character.
Yeah.
You are the story.
That's right.
And your story is the story.
Hmm.
And very often, when we're writing the memoir piece, because we're revisiting, in our zeal to be authentic and to really get it out there, it ends up almost being therapeutic in a lot of
Hmm.
ways
Hmm.
because you have to revisit so many things with especially the couple of traumas that you named. I mean, and
Hmm.
you just kind of drop those like they were nothing.
Hmm.
Burned down, then an earthquake.
Hmm.
Boom.
Hmm.
Most people that would have been the, the biggest thing in their lives, right? You had it happen twice. My goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but when you're revisiting all those things and all the other things that come up in your life, um, what sort of therapeutic issue, comes up for you? How difficult was that in that way, or was it something that helped you to deal with these things by doing the writing?
It tremendously helped me. I think the process is when you first put it back into your mind and are kind of cycling through it, you have a little bit of dip. So there's a residual period where, you first talk about it again or rewrite it again, and it's kind of active in your mind. Sorry, I have something off it. It's active in your mind for said period of time, a few days or whatever it is. And so then you're kind of processing through it again. And so as that dissolves away, if you will, you're now at a more confident point with that because me, like many people, tend to dismiss things as just those are things that happened. Don't need to really dive into this thing, cause and effect. Okay, that happened, and then I started having anxiety and things, but I didn't really sit with those things and say, you know, this is this actually mattered from a physical level to me. This affected me physically. Um, and so I think it's probably singularly the most effective thing therapeutically for growth for me of all the different options I can do. And as I mentioned in the book, I've done quite a few of them, um, because it there's ways that you can go through it where you could sit with the therapist, and those are very helpful things. There's a way you can do it where you sit in meditation with different things. But I think really writing it and sitting with it, at least when you're working on a memoir and you're really trying to be as honest with it as possible, you don't really give yourself the space to play around with it, and in not giving yourself the space, you might write something and then um, come to a place where it's like, wow, I don't know if I want to share that. That actually might be more that I'm comfortable with. And I understand that. I understand if people feel that way. Um, but you still did the work on it though. You still brought it to the surface, revisited it, said, okay, oh, okay, this happened at 5, and then this happened at 10, and then this happened at 20. Oh, okay. Again, in writing, the through line reveals itself. So you see the commonalities of life that have been, A to Z from that point to now that have kind of accumulated. And for me, it's like you don't realize why those were there until stopping and sitting with them. And so a memoir to not be released would still be quite effective, in most ways. And so if someone got into something, and we could talk about that too, about when it does become public facing and how that feels. But um, even that process is great. And then when you send it to the first person for a read, super and super. That's the first place of vulnerability. First person that reads it, right? And whoever that is in your circle. Um, then maybe you do a few more. Um, and so for me, it was really, once I thought it was ready for the world, um, was I think 4 years ago now. And I wasn't ready for what the world was going to say about it. So meaning I finished it. I thought it was ready to go out. But again, first time writer, I didn't really know. I sent it to somebody for a critique, and it was like, this is good, but it needs a lot of work. And so, in my mind, book was done 4 years ago. Book was not done 4 years ago, right?
Right.
Book was not done. Book was done in my mind because I think in a lot of ways it was like, okay, I got it all out. But it was then back to the drawing board. And so that required a full run through of edits again, and getting rid of a lot of stories that no longer mattered and diving in deeper. And so yeah, the memoir, just to finalize on that, the memoir writing itself is tremendously beneficial if just for yourself. if just for yourself. If you leave it there and need to sit with it for a certain amount of time and maybe never put it out or just show it to a couple close people, I think all are valid. All are valid.
Yeah. You brought up a lot of points there too. I want to take a step back so we can move into those points.
Sure.
Um, let's talk. You talked about process a couple of times.
Hmm.
I know a lot of musicians, and I've talked to them about their process.
Hmm.
I know a lot of writers, and I've talked to them about their process. I've never had the opportunity to talk to someone who's a musician and a writer
Mm.
about how those processes compare
Hmm.
and maybe are different. So I'm curious, about that in a big way. What was your process to get started with the book? Was it a set, hey, an hour a day, I'm going to do this, it's at this
Hmm.
time? Or,
Hmm.
was it, hey, whenever I find it, I'm going to take some notes? And how did that compare to how your music writing,
I love this.
goes?
I love what you just asked. I don't think I've ever been asked that. Um, with writing the book, it started out where I just started writing a little bit here, a little bit there, and I started sitting down and thinking, "Wow, this is the perfect space to be writing." And it started to kind of balance out with my time writing for music in the studio. It started to kind of be the same feeling, the exact same thing. And so what was interesting is the timing of it is so different. So 4 a.m. is the best time for me to write in my book because there's no sound, there's no calls, there's nobody doing anything. I could just sit with my words and be internal in that space. And so the habit for me, and this translates to honestly whatever time you go to, I mean, it's all relative to like just having, if you want to do it at night, I think that would probably work better. But just in my schedule, it was the morning. So I'm not, it actually is irrelevant in that capacity. But it was the habit of the morning, um, and having, I'm an avid reader, so I would read quality books, soak in the quality um, pages, and then write. Still do that. And so that was the way that I approached it. And a lot of times in music, the best music is when you're soaking in music before you get on the mic to go into the studio. You soak in some of the songs you think are best. You soak in some of just the energy that you're trying to convey and bring. And so that kind of goes back to the Stephen King thing or things like that. But um, for me, because I am a lyricist and a singer, it activates that same piece. So like what I want to say in a song and what I want to say on the pages, um, it activates that same truth. And I search in music for making sure my lyrics are really my truth. I write like a memoir, my music. My music's all about what I'm going through and through. And so it became that and it honestly mirrors a podcast in a lot of ways because this is my truth in another form. So the three are actually fairly identical in what I'm doing and
Yeah.
in what I'm talking about and where my mind's active. So yeah, writing and music parallel each other incredibly. And I was thinking about a friend of mine who guitarist, and he's a painter. And I was thinking about for him the medium and how he communicates is through the paint, through the brush, and through the guitar. And I thought that was kind of fascinating because these are two creative mediums, and the way that he's approaching them is not through words. It's through visuals and it's through sound in a different capacity. And so I just think that's kind of a beautiful thing to think about where we can translate it into, you know, um, to seemingly the same thing, but modified for whatever your medium of choice is. And mine happens to be words, you know.
Hmm. All right, I appreciate that answer. The leads right into my next question, to be honest. Whenever we're writing um, our books, we usually have a picture in our mind. We have a person or maybe a bunch of people together, an
Hmm.
amalgamation type thing of person or people that we're writing our book to or for.
Hmm.
And I wonder, first, is music the same way? Are you writing your music to or for somebody? Um, and in either case, who are you writing that to or for?
I think. Ultimately, the music and the book come from trying to connect with others through the human connection through what I've experienced. And, you know, like for the book, my favorite thing is when people say, we are so similar, because what that means to me is that I've connected that human condition. And that's really what I'm searching for is connection of the human condition that a human experience that I go through and what someone else goes through. And wherever they are on that journey, if they're like 28 rock bottom where I had my major, change moment, or whatever, or they're, a parent and their house just burnt down and they got young kids, connection. When someone tells me, wow, I got so much out of this, we're very similar. I find I'm the most grateful for, because that's kind of how I write it, is from a internal perspective to connect with others, um, through it, through the pain, through the sorrows, through the wins, and through the motivation, because I think that that's a big part of this too, is, call to action and motivation to continue. I called it finding purpose through pain, um, because it's in those low moments we can find those places of strength that can manifest, and that uncomfortableness just, we'll put it into the words, put it into the song, put it into the canvas, put it into if you're in sport and you like to do, put it into the training for the sport, put it into something that can be used as some type of fuel for progress versus, stagnation or deterioration or whatever.
Yeah. When I talk to first-time authors, what I hear very often is they totally underestimated how vulnerable they ended up having to be through the
Hmm.
process.
Hmm.
Because, you think you're going to just be able to write it down, it's going to come to you, it's going to come out, it's going to be great. And I don't know if it's in between putting it on the page and maybe handing it to someone else to read, right?
Hmm.
But somewhere in that mix, there's a moment where you're like, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I'm not quite ready for this.
Yeah.
Did you find that as a first-time author when you were going through that? And how did you handle that unbelievable amount of vulnerability that you really have to experience and find a way through?
Yeah, when there's very distinct moments of that vulnerability enhancing, right? There's having your significant others read it, which
Mm,
is, for me, it's, are you okay with this story being told? Are you okay with the truth and honesty? Um, then there's friends and things like that. Then there's people that know you but don't really know you, that now really know you. And so, I talk a little bit about this because it's in the book, because it's like, sometimes I believe that I was being very protective of certain aspects of my life to try and present something that, wasn't the totality of it. And so in writing a book, you're now giving the totality of your existence. And that is challenging because you have different segments of your life that are now no longer segmented. They're all merged together. So people from every category now are experiencing everything. And some of them are quite honest and raw vulnerabilities of the past, or things that I needed to digest. Um, so there's residual to that. There's people that really get it and that really connect to it. And there's people that might find it a little bit more off-putting, or, invoke something in them. And so I think there was definitely stages to where I questioned the quality. The one thing I always had was kind of just head down, go forward. Like if it wasn't good enough, like I was saying, the first round I said it to, I was just going to head down and rewrite it until it was done. And I rewrote it many times. And I just was going to continue. I really kind of had the mentality of like, no, I'm gonna keep rewriting this until it's there. And so I had it, I guess it was like a year ago, or close to a year ago. I had it to a place where I thought it was ready, and I had opportunity to send it to a literary agent. And I just wanted to kind of see what he thought. I didn't really have any expectations of that. I just wanted to see. Um, and he's like, I could work with this. I said, oh, you can work with this? He's like, yeah, I can work with this. We could get you placed you could get you published. I said, okay, all right. And that was exciting. And then I got a publisher, Skyhorse Publishing, picked it up. And then I was working with, the executive editing team, and I felt good because we were editing the final edits. I didn't have a ghost author or no AI or anything. This is just me. I wrote the whole story. There's nobody else that wrote
Nice.
it. It's just me.
Yeah.
And so when it was done, because it's been so long of writing this thing, for some reason I overlooked what it was going to be like to actually drop it out to the world. And the experience of vulnerability within the few weeks before releasing it, is one that I would say was one of the more challenging moments where you kind of have to say, okay, I'm now at a point of no return with this thing. Now we have to really just kind of completely own this whole experience. And just like when you're dealing with the traumas of the past and revisiting, it was the same thing where, you went in like, oh, wow, what are people going to think? And this and that, and it's vulnerable. And like, vulnerability can get ripped. People are going to rip it and so there's a couple weeks of just being in this strange parallel universe, I would say, in the vulnerability. And I think that's just part of the growth of this is, knowing that, okay, when you have these moments, they're going to hurt. They're going to kind of bring you back, knock you down a couple notches. But as long as there's a continuation with it, they don't have to freeze it. You don't have to stop with this thing, like you can just continue. And then there's just so many layers to that. And then being out there publicly on podcasts and things where you're now continuing the story. So, that's all an adjustment period to the core of writing it from a very, internal perspective of for your kids and then seeing that whole thing. Because the one way it's not like music is the truth and the vulnerability there, right? Music,
Mm.
you're not, I'm giving my authentic self to the music, but I'm not laying out the whole blueprint like this. I'm not giving all of the story. It's just purely in this one specific area of topic that that's the fun of music. It can be interpreted a lot of different ways by different people. And so I think a book is much a memoir book is much more linear in how it's received, or at least the details of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another place where this memoir portion of this comes back into play.
Yeah.
In music, if somebody doesn't like your music, they don't like your music necessarily.
Yeah.
It doesn't automatically mean they don't like you. And
That's
when
right.
you're writing the music, you don't have to worry about what someone else is, if they're going to be hurt by it or how they're going to
Right.
feel about what you wrote.
That's right.
With a memoir, as personal as that is, we also end up, as we're writing that, thinking about all of the people that are involved. Like you
Hmm.
mentioned, your significant other, your
Hmm.
family,
Hmm.
um, because the story involves them.
That's right.
And it involves, you. I mean, if you're the father and the husband in the scenario, then there's a book out there talking about my dad, right?
That's right. That's right.
you
That's
know,
right. That's
so
right.
all of a sudden I have a vested interest in it. How did your family react to you wanting to do this and to the finished product when it all kind of came out? Did you end up having to do revisions, or was it, pretty much okay once you got through all of it?
Yeah, I think that there was support through and through. I think there was digesting it, um, shedding some tears, but that's more, introspective on the journey and reminders of the times that have gone by and those things that we shared. I haven't had anyone that was apprehensive to what I put in it. I was pretty mindful of what I'm trying to accomplish, and then putting, you know, I'm not there to tell other people's stories. I'm there to tell mine. And so I only would put in elements that were absolutely vital for my story, and I think that's one of the core pieces to this thing. But I did, and I would definitely recommend anybody, have everyone read it. Because if you do say something that um, is difficult for someone, there's a couple stages I found in that actually is sometimes it's difficult because it's the truth. And that might take a little bit of time
Yeah.
for them to process. And they might actually come to the conclusion that, no, that's right. You
Mm.
know, and so that's where I think most of what I wrote landed, because I didn't I wasn't trying to be vindictive or you know, um, calling people out on things in any particular way. It's more of my journey and how I reacted to um, the things or the decisions I made.
Yeah. You talk about wanting to tell your story.
Mhm,
It's clear that you want to help, influence somebody's life for the better, this
mhm,
type of thing. But, at the end of the day, when you look at what you've done in your
mhm.
finished product of your book, um, what is, what was the purpose behind writing the book? What did you really hope to accomplish with the reader of your book?
I hope that when people read it, they get a little spark of encouragement to do that thing that they want to do. And if it's writing a book, then I hope that they get that. If it's, I actually don't want to necessarily put what it is out there. I actually just want to go back to the core concept of, okay, these things happened or whatever, and I'm going to start doing this. Or maybe even these things didn't happen, but I'm going to put in the time and the reps to grow in this particular category because I love it or I always wanted to do it. Like, I always want to be a writer. Well, just sit down for 20 minutes a day and write. Always wanted to be a musician. Just start making music and release it. You always wanted to run a race, run a couple miles, see how it feels. Like that's the kind of stuff I really talk about in here because it's like a curiosity for a lot of these things and then finding the things that really light you up and that can get you through the difficult times or whatever happens in the world or anything. It's like, okay, well, there might be some stuff going on that's difficult, but I have this thing and I have this thing and I have this thing and they sustain me and they bring me satisfaction. And um I hope and thankfully, a lot of the responses I've had were people that read it and are, I've had people that are like, I just bought a whole new music rig. I'm going to start playing music again. I'm going to release music or, I'm going to start writing or the people that call me, I got back into fitness. So, it's not, it's called Rise and Climb, but it's the caveat to that is it's however that translates for you. It's not just physical or anything like that. It's really um, rise and climb in the metaphor of wake up and you know climb that mountain in your life that you think's worth climbing or might think's worth climbing, and experiment and see. And so that's where I realized it's worth telling my whole story. It was like, okay, if I can get out there and help tens or hundreds or however many people to just do these little things in their own lives, then wow, that's so worth sharing this thing, so that's what motivates me. That's what motivates me to communicate, have talks like this and the like is that core principle.
Nice. Nice. As you wrote the book, did you feel like you were leading by example for these folks that you hope to, influence in that way?
I did. I did feel I was doing that. We all have flaws or things, so in no way do I want to present it as perfection in any capacity. But um, I have found some things that sustain me and that make the life that I was living at a certain point look extremely dark and uneventful. And it's almost like when you're in the cave and you don't realize you're in a cave, and then you see the light outside, and it's like that. And so um, I thought for that it kind of excited in me, like, oh no, no, okay, so this is my again, it goes back to the personal, but that's how it worked for me. This is how this worked for me. So I think I can help. Think I can help others kind of find a little bit of this if they're in that part of struggling. And again, it really to me is that very nuanced small decision, like in 2019 I made it. I just decided one day I'm gonna buy a Kindle, I'm gonna start reading every day, and just opened it the first time, and it was a very subtle decision, but all of a sudden I was so hooked to reading every day. And it was just this little subtle decision where I'm like, yeah, I think this would kind of be a good thing for me to do, and so that moment where someone has that spark, whatever it is the moment where I hope the words can maybe help in some capacity to help them go that direction.
Nice. Sort of a housekeeping type question. You decided you went looking for a publisher. You found a publisher to pick up your book, and you went that direction as opposed to the self-publishing, type
Mhm.
of route. With your experience with the publisher, how was that? What does your publisher do for you? Do you still have to do your own marketing? Kind of how did that work um, in that world for you?
Yeah, well, I think the first part that is absolutely amazing was having an executive editor team,
Mm.
a team to work on finalizing the book because they're not writing your book, um, but they're massaging it and helping you put the pieces in. So, example is at the end of every chapter, I have something called Purpose Through Pain, which is kind of it's me talking now versus my story then. So it's a recap, but it's also talking about what I learned from it. And um, my executive editor that I was working with was really wonderful in frank, direct, encouraging of that to go into conversational, but more me again, me now. So it made this beautiful concept of the story then versus me talking now, which it kind of you can only have the perspective of a child when you write about your childhood because you experienced it as a child. So the purpose through pain gave it this wonderful thing. So I think from that perspective, it was amazing. For an organizational perspective, it was amazing. For making sure it goes out, it's amazing. I think as authors, we all have to do our own work, our own promotion. I think if you go into something expecting different, um, most people are going to be genuinely disappointed unless you just wrote the next absolute guaranteed million sales book. I believe because I've learned this in music, you got to earn it.
Yeah.
So, I got to earn the full machine behind my works, right? And I learned that in music very easily, in being signed to record labels and things. Is you got to do the work, and so I think that just a piece on that is like if you're looking for the golden ticket, I think that almost everyone is going to be disappointed. I could be wrong, and you might have a little more expertise in this because I'm a new author. So, but from what I've seen, um, it's really about you gotta earn your stripes. You gotta grow it. You gotta grow it on your own. The publisher is going to help you, of course, but to think that it's just like signing a record deal in 1992, I don't think I haven't seen that at least. You know,
Nice. I appreciate the answer.
yeah,
All right. So, I mean, you're very fortunate to have been able to work with the publisher. There's a lot of folks who would love nothing more
yeah,
than to
yeah,
land a publisher. So,
yeah, yeah.
that's wonderful just on its own. And congratulations on becoming a published author because
Thank you.
so many people, especially the folks who listen to this program, that's what they're aspiring to is
Hmm. Hmm.
becoming that published author. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
when the book finally came out, and it's out, it's on the shelves, it's people can pick it up, can buy it, people are starting to read it, things like that.
Hmm.
um how did life change for you after you became a published author and your memoir of all things was public?
There's so many pieces to that. I mean, I've got to almost just choose which direction to go down. Regardless of if I found a publisher or not, or if I self-published, as you probably know and are aware of, the completion of that task was almost one where you just want to just break down crying because you've been putting so much work into something, and when it's there or when you hold it, oh, when you hold that thing, like I got to hear, like when I held this in my hand and felt it, and then just saw the pages that I've been working on so long. It even actually gets me a little bit because we're revisiting it. That in whatever version it comes out is such a special moment. And I think it's just like releasing your first song or anything, but it's more because it's just the whole journey flashes through your head when you hold it. And in a world of Kindles, I didn't realize how effective holding it was going to be. I haven't printed a CD in a decade, right? It's just all streaming. But it made me think maybe I should print some CDs and some records because holding that book was something different. And so that's one aspect of it. Waiting for people to read it is an interesting thing, right?
Right.
That's that's something. That's something interesting. And I've learned you don't want to, well, just like I guess in music, you don't want to ever expect anything. Everybody's journey through the book and interpretation of it is different. And so it's all okay. And you don't want to also, I don't think I want to like put a narrative to it. Like if someone doesn't reach out and tell you anything, well, maybe let's not jump to conclusions on. Let's let it be what it is. I mean, not everybody reads, right? Some people kind of read. I think I heard the stat was most books people start, they get 30% in and they stop, right?
It's close to that, I think.
Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
It's pretty
Yeah.
close. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, pretty close. So that means they're not going to reach out to you for quite some time because they don't even know what the story is, right? Because they start it, they have good intention, but life is busy. So that goes back to the earning the read kind of thing.
Right.
So I think that part's interesting part of it. But all in all, I would love anybody listening who's thinking about writing to experience that in their form because I think it's a special moment and it's a very personal moment. And and that completion um is worth it. And I also just would say, you can always do revisions. Like a lot of times in music, people don't release music because they want it right. Like you can always do revisions on your book. It doesn't mean that you can't give it round two or round three. And so um I think that assessment of, it doesn't necessarily have to be absolutely perfect. And I would encourage, I don't know how you feel about AI and things. I love the idea of the process. If you can't afford an editor, okay, there's an argument that you should use what you feel comfortable with. But as long as the words maintain yours and you're getting better at craft, um, I think that's where the ultimate joy in this writing thing lies, is how enjoyable it is to see the words flow better and you read a paragraph and you're like, well, that's a lot better than you go back to one that I'm sure you did this. Go back to one you wrote a couple years ago and you're like, okay, that one, right? That one's
Right.
not quite there. That one's not quite there. I got some tricks to put to that now. So,
Right.
yeah.
I do that. I still go back to my first one and I'm like, how could I possibly publish this? Like, what was
Yeah.
I thinking at
Right.
that moment?
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
that's so good. I mean, that's amazing though when you do that because then you've gone here with it, right?
Right.
What you couldn't see before, you can see now. And in music, it's like you can hear details in music that I used to not be able to hear, even on, other people's music. Like I'm like, well, I could never hear that they use the wrong reverb with the wrong tail on that, but now I can, And so, yeah, that's a good sign.
Yeah. I love how open you've been about this entire process, and everything that you've talked about. And frankly, I've personally learned a lot about how you have connected the music, production alongside of writing, which has been fascinating to me.
Mm.
I do have one more question for you, as we kind of bring this, around. I could talk to you for another 30 minutes just about how we feel about our
Right,
books,
right.
because I think we're both really on the same page with a lot
I
of this
think you are.
stuff. But
I think you are.
but before I do that, before we have our last question, let everybody know how they can reach you, how they can reach out to you, contact you, find the book, etc.
Yeah. So, the book's available, on Amazon or any of the places you want to buy a book, you can get it. If it's not in the store, you can order it. I got the Simon and Schuster distributed it, so you got it all over the place. But you got to order it. It's not in a lot of the stores, but so you can order it. You can get it on Amazon. I did the audiobook. I have the hardcover, uh, and I have the Kindle edition. So all three are available, and I think it's a personal preference on which one. Um, you can get my music on Spotify or any of the streaming services. And then you can go to riseandclimb.com, which is my website, and you can get into a little bit more. And then I have a link in my book for after you complete the book. You can go to a special page where it gets a little bit more into it and has pictures of my life and things like that as well. So a lot of different channels and lanes.
Wonderful. We'll have a whole bunch of those in the show notes for people to, reach out, find you. Did you have the opportunity to read your own audiobook? Are you the one who did it?
I did, yeah, yeah, because I'm an audio engineer. That's so I have, I did it all myself.
Yeah.
And I actually did it on this SM7B right here. And,
Nice.
so that was, I mean, we could talk for at length about audiobook, recording and things like that. But, yeah, so I did, narrate it myself.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right. That's cool. I mean, it's your memoir. So I love that it's going to be in your voice in the audiobook.
Yeah, well, I was actually quite insistent on it with the publisher. I said the one thing is I have to read it myself because I want to. It just would feel weird to hear. People wouldn't really. It wouldn't translate correctly if it wasn't my voice with my words, And so
Yeah.
I felt it was worth it. Took a while, but it was worth it.
That's awesome. All right. Last question for you is, and I like to end with this. We have so many aspiring authors who listen to this
Hmm.
program, and you are a published, a first-time published author.
Hmm.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
What is the best advice that you can give to either authors out there or aspiring authors who are out there who are not quite where you are yet?
I would just say simply, try and do it every day, and that is to me the ultimate thing because you turn around on after day one and you're a month in and then you're 6 months in and then you're a year in and just through the repetitions you can write in your phone if you can't get to a computer you can write it with a pen. It's just about putting it in every day and finding the joy within it. So to me the number one thing is find the joy within it, put it as kind of a mandatory thing like brushing your teeth, and just crave the art of writing. Just love it and be within it. And again, turn around in a year and just feel that is. But it just starts with that one day, just starts with one day.
Nice. Great advice. I love that. And when you're writing every day, you're connected. You can connect to your own source material. It's beautiful. So I
Yeah.
think that's really, really important. Okay, author of his memoir, Rise and Climb, Ben Barbic, author and musician. Ben, thank you, man, for coming on and just giving us a very different perspective, on
Yeah.
all the everything that happens in the background and how vulnerable we all have to be. A great message, and I can't wait to hear what you do next, brother. I'm
Oh,
sure you've
thank
got
you.
another one in you somewhere, right?
I absolutely do. I've been working on it for a while now, so I appreciate it. Thank you for having
There
me on,
you
man.
go.
This was great conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, folks, this has been another absolutely fantastic episode of the Right Path podcast, where the truth still matters and words still have power. Folks, this is the show for authors who know that every single page is a step forward towards finding your right path. Until next time.